So good afternoon, Lee, and thanks very much for joining us on OGV Energy. Fantastic achievement in terms of your contract award, which is Scotland's largest for the decommissioning sector. And thanks very much for giving us an opportunity to go through things in a bit more detail.
Well, thank you for your time.
The first thing I wanted to ask you is a little bit about kind of your background and how you got into the decom business, Lee.
Sure, yeah. So I went offshore when I was 18 years old, actually. So nice and young, straight from uni. And I went offshore on rotation. So I started off as an apprentice instrument technician, actually, and had various positions offshore through instrumentation and control and maintenance as well. Some project management experience there. But I promised myself that I would do 10 years and 10 years, and that would be it, ultimately. Then I would come onshore. That was the aspiration from the start. So just before the 10th anniversary, actually, I came onshore as the instrument engineer, onshore support. So done that for a bit, then moved across to project engineering, project management, and dabbled a little bit in decommissioning as well at the time with the company I was with. I then migrated across to full-time decommissioning on a contract basis. And that was the first real full-time engagement in a decommissioning project that I had. From there, I've done the same thing across Europe, so various locations as a decommissioning consultant, and the last sort of longer-term post that I had was across in Oslo, in Norway. So I was there with a company in Oslo for 3 years as a consultant, and that's where I met the co-owner of the company, Frank Bratton, as well, and effectively that's where we coined the idea, and it went from there.
And clearly Norway at that point in time were one of the key countries involved in most of the decommissioning projects.
It was, yes. We were both consultants for AF Offshore Decom at the time, a really big player in the decommissioning market, and they still are today. The guys do an excellent job. They've got a great methodology, and they offer quite a broad range of the decommissioning lifecycle service. So Frank and I were both there for some years, and we thought we could potentially replicate that, do something very similar. Back in the UK, because there were no players offering that full service in the UK at that time, and I think we might be the only one so far still. So we sort of took the plunge, if you like. We thought, if we don't do it now, we'll always be asking what if.
What was the trigger point for you, Lee?
We were living across there for 2 or 3 years, and effectively just wanted to come back to the UK, back to Scotland as well, to live back home for a bit. So I'd done a little digging there to see if there was any potential sites for an onshore decommissioning and dismantling facility. We managed to secure and do a land grab effectively. So the first place was Hunterston Park on the west coast, which was quickly followed by Energy Park Fife on the east coast in Lethal Fife. And once we got some traction there, that was it. Let's go and try and make a go of this in the UK. And that's how we kicked off.
And the name, how did you come around CessCon Decom?
Good question. There's not many people know the answer to this, actually, so that is a good question. So when Frank and I had the idea initially, we thought we'd start off, I would say easy, but an easier option as a consultancy initially, a decommissioning consultancy. So we came up with the name Cessation Consultants. And then we shortened that to CessCon, Cessation Consultants. So we've done that, and we run with that name in Norway for the first year of the company, Norwegian arm of the company, let's say. And we executed a project across there on Statoil's Kårstø gas plant for a year. And that was our first kind of major project. Then when we decided to move back to the UK and establish the business here in January 18, we bolted on the word decom to that. So there's sort of a clue in the title. It's a bit easier for search engine optimization.
Okay. It certainly rolls off the tongue a little bit easier than Cessation Consultants.
Exactly, yes. It was never going to be called that. We just thought that would be the theory behind it, and then we shortened to CessCon.
So you've got some fantastic background that we're looking at there, Lee, which is obviously the site itself. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit about the features and benefits of that site and how it came about?
Sure, yeah. So I'm familiar with the site. Excuse me. I did some work there many years back when we built a new build platform there that's on west of Shetland at the moment. So I was familiar with the location, the yard itself. I had worked on the quayside before, managing a project there. So when we were contacted by Scottish Enterprise with Fife Council at the time, via third party, would this facility be of interest? Of course, grab it now kind of thing, because I knew how good it was. It's a brilliant location. It's got direct access to the River Forth, of course, open access to the North Sea, and it's got an excellent central belt location with access to local supply chain, local labour as well. So the facility next door, of course, has been building new platforms for 30 odd years. So some of the platforms that we're actually bringing back for decommissioning and dismantlement in the yard were actually built in the same location, so 30, 40 years back. So it's a really good...
So that facility belongs to BIFAB?
Yeah, the one next door to us, yes, that's the BIFAB facility. Next door to us. So there's a fence separating both facilities.
Okay, and is there anything unique to that site from an environmental perspective that makes it stand out?
Yeah, so it was effectively a greenfield location when we got there. It was just wasteland, ultimately, earth. So we designed the full layout, the full yard design, all the civils works, we've done it ourselves in-house. And the aim of the design was to have one of the most advanced decommissioning facilities in Europe in terms of environmental protection. So we've built a dismantlement pad, if you like. So it's a concrete dismantlement area that is around 10,000 square metres of solid concrete just now in phase one, but that will extend out to 30,000 square metres potentially late this year, early next year. Then we'll go from there. It has full water collection and treatment facilities as well. So all emissions to the pad and to ground are collected and they are routed to our water treatment plant. So we've also designed a custom water treatment plant. And ultimately it's a combination of pumps, filtration units and hydrocyclones. So the produced water and the runoff from the pad itself comes into the plant. We filter that down so much to polish the fluids that we're allowed to discharge that back to the River Forth. So that's quite unique. We worked with SEPA for many, many months, understanding what the discharge limits were. And we built a discharge model, a dilution model and dispersion model as well. And there was a lot of engineering that went into that. We done over 50,000 iterations through the model to understand exactly what we can discharge to see. And now the discharge levels that we've achieved, the limits are actually tighter and we're producing cleaner fluids than some whisky distilleries in Scotland actually. So it's quite tight. It really is quite tight.
So if you're looking at other potential decommissioning sites, so I think we know who they are. There's obviously been a lot of talk about why Scotland hasn't been winning some of the contracts over the past few years, and there are obviously market reasons for that. But this is really a step ahead now in terms of being tailor-made for its purpose. Congratulations on winning, as I say earlier on, Scotland's biggest ever decommissioning contract. How did that come about?
So we've been working on tenders for the last 2 years, ultimately, since we established the company. And we've been working with Allseas and Spirit Energy for almost a year now. So tendering for projects, the same as our competition, ultimately. But being a new company, a startup, ultimately, we had to go through a very rigorous audit program. So that's all about our health and safety, quality objectives as well, our operations, engineering, all the technical aspects of it as well, so that Allseas and Spirit were very comfortable that the expertise is in-house. Ultimately, you can go to a company who has 20 years experience, but it's not the company that has the experience, it's the personnel and resources within that company where the experience lies. So we had to ultimately prove that we have the expertise in-house, even though the company was only 2 years old, several hundred years of decommissioning experience in-house. So we went back and forth for a long time until we got to the point that Allseas and ultimately Spirit Energy, being the operator, were happy with what we were proposing. They were really happy with how we operate, and that was key to the health and safety and how we plan to operate this facility, which is totally different from anywhere else.
And also, you've got a specific name, kind of terminology that you kind of that you utilise for what you do there. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah. So right at the very start of the company, what we've done is we sat down and thought, okay, what are the failings, or not the failings, the limitations of other yards ultimately? What have been the lessons learned there from incidents and accidents that's happened over the years? What we found was that it's mostly a demolition mindset, an onshore demolition mindset, and it's called yard demolition, onshore demolition. So demolition is a word that we never use. We never see that in any of our procedures or documentation or any presentations either. It's dismantlement and recycling is what we do. So we had the chance to trial this with the project, the Corsa project that I mentioned at the start. And what we've done is, as soon as you come through the gate now into the yards, it's the same as if you're in an offshore installation. So if you think about permit to work, toolbox talks, risk assessments, PPE, gas monitoring, everything is the exact same. We've built our own permit to work system that's based on an offshore operations permit to work system, although there's a few tweaks to allow that to adapt to decommissioning. And that helps us achieve the excellent health and safety record that we've got to date for what we've done so far and what we plan to do.
So bringing the offshore standards onshore, effectively.
Exactly. So that's the name that we coined for that. As you mentioned at the start there, it's offshore, onshore, and that's what we do. There's no difference. So our team who go offshore and do surveys quite regularly for tenders and engineering can quite easily go offshore tomorrow and come back to the yard, and the standards and the way of operating is very same. There's no difference.
And what do you think it was that won you the contract? Was it the yard itself coupled with your experience? I mean, obviously there would have been an awful lot of competition for this contract. What was your viewpoint on that?
Absolutely. So I guess it was a combination of several things. So firstly, the yard design, obviously with the pad as well. So to add to the pad design, we have an impermeable membrane under that as well. So there's zero emissions to the ground as well. So the environmental aspect there, what we're doing there was quite key. This new concept of operating the onshore disposal yard as an offshore facility in terms of health and safety was a key. That's a game changer in our clients' opinion, people we've spoken to. So that was a big factor in that as well. Plus the fact that we really heavily focus on reuse and recycling. So the circular economy is key for us, and the last resort for us is disposal rather. Consideration. So ultimately we try and find ways of reducing the cost of operations as well. So if we can resell a gas turbine, for instance, for X thousands, then we would deduct that from the cost for the client as well. And that also contributes to the key 35% reduction in decommissioning spend that the OG and the market are after.
So from a national perspective, this could really be a historic moment for Scotland moving forward and for your company in this space. What does it mean from a job creation perspective, given what's happening in the wider world at the moment?
Yeah, so it's not as vast as a construction project, obviously. Bifab next door maybe had between 600 and 1,000 personnel on site on a daily basis. We're a much smaller outfit, and decommissioning itself requires less resources. So we will increase our resources at the yard in Fife by between 30 and 50 as a minimum, just for this first project. But of course, that's directly proportional to the projects that have been executed in the yard at the time. So if there's multiple scopes ongoing, then the resources will increase as well. So.
And what types of discipline are you going to be recruiting?
So in the last year, we've recruited most of the project management and engineering teams. So we've got a really good, robust, diverse team here for that. In the yard itself, mostly it will be operations resources. So dismantlement personnel, so you're looking at demolition excavator operators there, top men burners, as they're called as well, so the hot cutting resources that can work at height, and the decontamination experts as well. So decontamination, or EDC, engineering down and cleaning, is a service that we offer in-house as well. It's all done internally. In decontamination and flushing, purging, various things prior to hot cutting. So there's resources and specialist skills there as well, and that will be the whole of it. Sorry,
Lee. Clearly, as Bifab are right next door to you, I'm presuming that you've already been in touch or been probably bombarded by a lot of these individuals. So whilst you're not going to be able to be a solution for all of them, certainly some of them will be able to be rehomed and to provide opportunities for. But this is just on the one project. Does the yard itself have capacity to run parallel projects, and what is your maximum at any one time?
Absolutely. So this year we are prepared for 25,000 tonnes to come into the yard. So if you compare that to the Brent Delta project, the platform that we're all familiar with, the first one that was removed, that was around the 25,000 tonne mark. We have the real estate in the Energy Park Fife yard to accommodate 100,000 tonnes at any one time. So we can have 4 Brent Deltas in the yard being worked on at the same time. We've got 500,000 square metres of real estate there to play with. So yeah, there's loads of room, the throughput there, the volume. We just have to be careful that we manage them and not overload the facility in the first instance.
And you're still, it sounds like you're still finishing off some of the build on some of it anyway, but if we fast forward X amount of months, there is potential there for you to be running 4 projects at any one time, which could then mean, you know, an extra 150 to 200 positions.
Exactly, yes. So there'll be direct full-time equivalent positions there of between project driven, of course, the numbers you mentioned there between 1 and 200. Then there's all the external jobs created as well in the local area, with the hotels being utilised more, shops and various things as well. But I guess that's a key driver for us. So we start in Methil ultimately, and we try and resource load from the local area. So we've actually cherry-picked 2 or 3 really good engineers and people from BIFAB that are now redundant. So we've worked with them in the past. We know their capabilities, so we've taken them on board as well, which is excellent. They know the yard, they know the quay side, and they know how to operate with the tides there. So that was really key. We then work back out. So we'll try around 5 from the positions that we require, then we'll spread our net a bit further as well. So we're really focused on job creation in Methil, in Fife, Scotland, and obviously UK is a wider area.
Fantastic. From a legislation perspective, the UK government have obviously put in some fairly onerous demands on the sector, looking for a 35% cost reduction from the projects. I mean, how do you stack up against these targets?
So ultimately, we're a business, the same as any other business. We are revenue driven, and we have to make profit and margin as well. So, but we know the 35% cost reduction target. I'm part of the decommissioning leadership group from Decom North Sea as well. So we've been focusing on this for quite some time now. And we are always looking at ways to make operations more efficient. So can we bring in 2 platforms at the same time, for instance? Can we then share cranes and heavy plants and share the mob costs? There's cost efficiencies to be had by multiple scopes ongoing. There's economies of scale to be had as well. So we're always striving to do things better, quickly, safer, and more cost efficient, to be honest. Ultimately, the cheaper we can do this work, the more cost savings go back to the oil companies and therefore the tax. So
are you confident that you will come close to meeting those targets?
We will, yes. It's a challenge at the moment because we have to get the first project into the yard, then execute that, and that will be our benchmark ultimately. Then we'll strive year on year to reduce those costs by increasing the optimisation.
And what impact, looking at what's happening clearly across the world at the moment, what impact is the pandemic having on your plans?
So up until the lockdown, I guess, we were in the office. So we've got offices in Livingston, of course in Methil, in Fife, and in Glasgow as well. So we were kind of spread out. So since then, luckily for us, we're going through the upfront engineering phase of this project. So we can work from home, we can work remotely. We've got Teams and Zoom and everything else, we can do that. If the lockdown continues into when the assets land at the yards in Q1, Q2 this year, the duration for the execution or dismantlement may extend a little bit because we have got to obviously implement the social distancing rules and various other things as well. So we have got preparations in place already for that. The site is configured, so there's one-way systems and things now. So it might slow things down a little, but providing that we can still operate at the yard, we should be fine. We should be okay.
So it will still go ahead on. relatively on time. Okay. And from a wider perspective, give us some sense of CessCon's plans geographically, globally. I mean, are you looking at other geographical areas?
We are, yes. So, of course, the UK is our first and foremost location. Our head office is here in Livingston, ultimately with the yard in Fife. We also acquired 2 other businesses in 2018, Walker Weld Engineering in Glasgow and Mitchell Engineering in Glasgow as well. So we have a good workforce through there for welding, fabrication and machining that complements what we are doing in decommissioning. The guys can fabricate grillages and sea fastening and various things for us as well, plus execute the burning. So we're kind of spread a little bit over Scotland at the moment. We have operations ongoing just now in Thailand as well, and we have an office in Bangkok in Thailand. And we are in the process of establishing a new yard in Brunei as well just now. So we're kind of a little bit several geographic locations without risking a shotgun approach, if you like. So we have to make sure that there are specific targets and we concentrate on those locations. But we've got really good partners there. We've got staff over there full-time, expats from the UK as well in these locations. So it's going to find at the moment.
Oh, it's great to hear that you've got ambitious plans. And give us some sense of the size of the market here, Lee.
The market in the UK is quite substantial. It's absolutely huge. I think we're all aware of the numbers there. In terms of platforms to be decommissioned,
could you reiterate those numbers for the benefit of those that are unaware?
Depends if you're looking at the full market. You're 20+ billion is the forecast expenditure.
How many platforms?
In the North Sea, excuse me for not knowing the last count, but I would hazard a guess there's over 1,000, maybe 1,200 installations that need to be decommissioned at some point in the future. If we were looking at platforms within the next 5 years, I would suggest there's maybe, or say 10 years, there's maybe 100 installations to be removed and decommissioned over the next 10 years. So if you have 10 yards, that's 10 platforms each, all the way through. There's more work coming towards us than can be handled, actually.
So that's really good news, really, for the decom sector, and we're all aware of the challenges that the sector itself has faced in terms of getting things going with the volatility of the market. Are you able to provide some kind of update and insights on how that's going?
It's a difficult question to answer at the moment with lockdown. The plans for decommissioning are obviously moving to the right slightly here. There's some mergers and acquisitions as well. There's some smaller companies, oil companies coming in and purchasing assets from the larger players who are now reversing out of the UK. So there's a few projects that we've had and tenders that we've had in the pipeline for some time that have now moved another year to the right. But there's new projects and new work coming towards us each month, actually, to be honest. So we've got close to maybe 15 live tenders out today.
Wow.
And that's obviously a minimum of one platform per tender.
Yeah, I remember we spoke to the interim managing director of Decom North Sea, Will Rowley, I think back in November, and there was still some discussions ongoing with the government and various solutions being proposed. What message would you have for the government at this time? Are you getting the support that you're looking for, and what could they be doing better to help you?
On a personal level, yes, we have as a company. We've had great support from the Scottish Enterprise and Fife Council, and we also received some funding from the Decommissioning Challenge Fund as well last year to help kickstart and develop the yard. So that was excellent. I guess funding for startups, it's been a challenge to secure funding and get people to invest in the business from the start, because ultimately you're a startup, and when we promote year 1, year 2, your turnover could be 10 million. They don't believe it because it's unheard of from a startup. But if you look at the numbers that we are playing with in the decommissioning sector, they are huge. They are really significant. So the government's been great for us so far personally. There maybe could be a little push to maybe encourage operators to fix their decommissioning plans instead of moving them to the right a little bit. Because each time small businesses or any supply chain company in the sector plans or hopes that a tender will come out and a project will be awarded and it moves to the right, it really hurts. It hurts that business, and it is having now an impact on that. So some certainty of when projects are coming along, which allows companies to then plan and resource accordingly for that, would be great. And maybe also if there's some platforms sat there down-manned already, as the one in the US is idle iron, ultimately. Maybe a little bit more encouragement that you've only got maybe 2 years to remove that. So there's more visibility to all of us, what's coming up, and help us to plan the business better.
So visibility and to aid planning more than anything else. And yeah, we appreciate that there's some market forces in play there that provide reasons why things haven't moved forward. But from our side of things, it's fantastic news. Congratulations. You'll obviously, when I spoke to you last week, your phone hadn't stopped ringing for the entire week. It took us a while to get hold of you. So clearly you've got an awful lot on your plate. But we wish you all of the best, and thank you very much for joining us today. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Bye for now.